It started with the echo of shoes on the polished floor, slow, deliberate, and heavy with something unspoken. The courtroom was already tense, as if everyone could feel that today wasn't going to be like the others. A few jurors shifted in their seats. The bailiff leaned in, whispering something to the judge. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but if they had been, they would have caught every strained look and confused glance as the back door opened, and in walked the man with a dog, not a guide dog, not a police canine, just a dog. A golden retriever, calm and silent, walking proudly beside an unshaven man in a worn flannel shirt that looked like it had stories of its own. The courtroom fell still. It wasn't just the dog. It was the way the man held himself, like someone who had been waiting years for this moment and had almost given up believing it would come. The judge raised an eyebrow, lips tightening in disapproval. "Mr. Dalton, this is a court of law. Why is there an animal in my courtroom?" The man didn't flinch. He looked directly at the judge, his voice steady but low. "Because, Your Honor, this dog is my witness, and if you'll just let me explain, I swear on everything I've got, it'll make sense. You'll understand why I had to bring him, and why I couldn't come alone." There were murmurs, a chuckle or two from the audience, but no one interrupted. Maybe it was the way the man stood. Maybe it was the quiet dignity of the retriever at his side. But something about the moment held everyone still. Even the judge didn't bang the gavel. Instead, he leaned back in his chair and said, almost curiously, "Go on." And so, James Dalton did. He walked to the witness stand, the dog trailing close behind. Every step he took seemed to carry the weight of memories too hard to name. He didn't bother with fancy words. He didn't need them. "My name is James Dalton. I was a maintenance supervisor at the Pine Hill Animal Shelter until last winter. What happened there is why we're all here today." "What happened there is why I brought him," he said, patting the retriever gently on the head. "This is Harper, and believe me when I say he saw it all." The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Mr. Dalton, this is highly irregular." "Irregular?" James shot back, but not with anger, with pain. "So is locking doors when the storm warning's already been issued. So is ignoring the cries of caged animals when water's flooding through the vents. So is pretending it was just an accident when everyone knew it wasn't." He paused. His shoulders sagged for a moment, and Harper nuzzled closer to his leg. "There were 26 animals in that shelter the night the power went out. 11 made it. You're wondering why I'm standing here with a dog when this trial's about the disappearance of a shelter manager and a whistleblower report that went missing. But it's all connected. And Harper remembers what they tried to erase." The courtroom didn't know whether to laugh or lean in. A dog that remembered? It sounded crazy. But James didn't sound crazy. He sounded broken and honest and deeply sure of the strange truth he carried. Then something happened no one expected. Harper, who had been calm and still, suddenly sniffed the air, wagged his tail, and nudged James's coat. James looked down. He hesitated, then slowly undid the buttons on his coat. He crouched low beside the dog, and then the quiet room drew a collective gasp. From beneath his coat, one by one, 5 tiny heads emerged. Kittens, barely weeks old, covered in fuzz, blinking wide eyes under the blinding courtroom lights. A woman in the back covered her mouth. The judge leaned forward, and even the stenographer paused, typing, her fingers frozen above the keys. "These," James whispered, voice cracking, "are what was left behind." The moment stretched. 5 kittens, warm and alive, nestled against a retriever's side, cradled under the coat of a man, with nothing left but the truth. It wasn't just dramatic, it was shattering. You could feel it, something shifting in the room. Because suddenly this wasn't just about a missing manager or a corrupted shelter fund. It was about survival, about helpless lives nearly erased, and about the man who wouldn't let that happen. Not again. And no one, not the judge, not the jury, not the reporters scribbling furiously, had the faintest clue what else he was about to reveal. But Harper knew, and the kittens, warm and safe now, were only the beginning. There was a long silence after the kittens appeared, the kind that didn't just fill a room, it filled your chest, like breath held too long. The judge didn't say a word, but his fingers drummed the wooden bench in small, deliberate taps. The prosecutor leaned forward, lips parted, as if trying to find the right angle to object, but unsure whether the court had just slipped into something sacred or ridiculous. And James didn't move. He stayed there on one knee, one hand resting gently on Harper's back. the other loosely shielding the fragile lives nestled in his coat. They were found inside a storage locker behind the shelter, James finally said, standing slowly. Wedged between broken crates and chewed wires. No one was supposed to go back there. Not during the storm, not after what happened. The judge narrowed his eyes. And who do you believe put them there, Mr. Dalton? James didn't answer right away. He took a slow breath, then walked to the stand, placing a folded sheet of paper on the edge. Before she disappeared, Marlene, that's the shelter's night shift coordinator, she left this note in my drawer. I found it 2 days after she vanished. Everyone kept saying she ran off, but if you read that note, you'll see she didn't. Run. She was scared, and she knew something was coming. The bailiff picked up the note and handed it to the judge, who began reading silently. The words were scrawled in a rush, and yet each sentence landed like it had been carved into stone. James, if anything happens to me, check the generator logs. And don't trust Carson. He knows. He's been taking the meds, the animals. He's been moving them. I tried to confront him. I think he's watching me now. Please, be careful. The room felt colder. Carson, James said, his voice hardening now, was our director. He was supposed to protect them, but he was ordering them put down, quietly, saying it was overcapacity, claiming food shortages. But we had plenty. I kept the inventory myself. The real reason? Money. The shelter got more donations when they claimed to be at risk of shutdown. More drama, more pity campaigns. He wanted headlines, not lives. A woman from the audience suddenly rose to her feet. She wore a navy jacket with the local rescue league's emblem. You're lying, she said, voice shaking with restrained fury. Carson saved dozens of animals. He worked day and night. This is slander. The judge raised his hand. Order, sit down, or I'll have you removed. James didn't even turn to look. I know it's hard to believe. That's why I brought Harper, and them. He gestured toward the kittens, who now clung to the fabric of his coat, their tiny bodies huddled against warmth. Because truth like this doesn't fit on paper. It has to be lived. It has to be seen. Then he turned to the jury. Harper was there the night of the flood. I was stuck on the highway trying to get back in after the power cut, and when I finally arrived, the place was already half underwater. And Harper, he wasn't supposed to be in that building, but somehow he got inside, and he wasn't alone. He paused, his throat tightening. He was carrying something in his mouth when I found him in the lobby. Something small, cold, not breathing. A kitten, just one, at first, and then he went back. Someone in the courtroom gasped softly. I watched that dog go in and out of the flooded shelter 5 times. Each time he came back, he had another kitten in his mouth. I didn't even know where he was finding them. I was too busy trying to pull cages loose, screaming for anyone still trapped. But he knew where to go. He stopped, overcome, and placed a trembling hand over his mouth. Harper leaned into him again, steady as always. I would have lost them. I would have lost everything that night. But that dog saved 5 tiny lives in a building everyone else had given up on. And when the water reached the breaker panel, I thought I was done too. But Harper pulled me by the collar, dragged me halfway across the lobby. He didn't stop until I was outside. One of the jurors, a gray-haired man with a notepad on his lap, had tears in his eyes now. He wasn't alone. After the storm, Carson shut everything down, cited structural damage, said the shelter was being investigated, but he didn't call the police. He didn't file a report. He didn't even tell the board Marlene was missing. He just left, gone. With every file, every video recording wiped from the system. The judge set down the note slowly. And these kittens? They survived all this time? James nodded. I kept them hidden, fed them from my own paycheck, moved them from house to house, city to city. I didn't know who to trust, but I promised. Marlene, if anything happened, I'd find a way to tell the truth. And this courtroom is the last place left. The judge looked down at the kittens once more, now curled into the crook of James's coat like they belonged there. And, in a way they did, survivors of something too cruel to name, carried in silence by a man and his dog who refused to let their story die. In the back, someone stood up quietly, a woman in her late 50s, wrapped in a green wool shawl. Her face was pale, her eyes wide. Your Honor, she whispered, I think I know where Carson is hiding. The room spun on its axis. The tension that had hovered in the air now broke wide open, because the truth wasn't just in the courtroom anymore. It was out there, and it wasn't finished. The entire courtroom turned toward the woman in the green shawl. Her voice hadn't been loud, but it carried like a stone dropped into still water. breaking the heavy silence with ripples that refused to fade. The judge looked up slowly, eyes narrowing as if trying to place her face. The bailiff was already stepping forward, unsure whether to escort her out or closer to the stand. But James spoke first, voice low and stunned. "Evelyn?" She nodded, clutching her shawl tight around her shoulders. "It's been a long time, James, but I remember everything." The judge leaned forward. "Do you have relevant information, ma'am?" Evelyn looked straight at him. "I was the shelter's volunteer coordinator. I worked every Wednesday. I was the last person to see Marlene alive." Gasps followed her words like an aftershock. James looked shaken. "Why didn't you come forward before?" "I was scared," she said, her voice trembling but honest. "Carson knew I'd been asking questions about the supply orders. The food shipments weren't matching the records. Animals were disappearing from the intake logs. But it wasn't until I saw the basement, what was in it, that I realized what was really happening." The judge motioned for the bailiff to escort her to the front. As she walked down the aisle, she passed James, and for a moment their eyes met, his filled with disbelief, hers with guilt. When she reached the witness stand, she held herself stiffly, like someone trying to stay upright, despite the weight of memory pressing down. "Tell us what you saw," the judge said. Evelyn swallowed. "Hard. The night before the storm, I stayed late. I'd offered to organize the old medication cabinets, but really, I was trying to find out where the missing vaccines had gone. That's when I heard Marlene and Carson arguing downstairs. I followed, the sound to the basement storage. The door was open a crack. Her hands tightened on the edge of the stand. There were crates, sealed, but I heard something inside, whimpering. When Marlene shouted, I saw Carson push her. She didn't fall hard, but she hit the shelf and a box of files spilled. She screamed at him, said she was done covering. For him, that she'd already made copies, that someone would find out. Evelyn paused, her voice cracking. That's when he saw me. James took a step forward, instinctively, as if to protect her from the memory itself. He didn't say a word. He just stared. I ran before he could reach me. I didn't go back. I thought, maybe if I stayed silent, he wouldn't come after me. I left town 2 days later. The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear one of the kittens sneeze softly in. James's coat. And now? The judge asked. Why speak up today? Because I saw the news report, Evelyn replied. The story about the shelter trial. The dog, the kittens, and I recognized the coat. She looked at James. That old flannel. You used to wear it every winter. Marlene once said if you had to pick between saving your paycheck or a puppy, you'd give away your boots before. You let an animal freeze. James looked down, the memory hitting harder than any testimony. Carson didn't leave town like they said, Evelyn continued. He moved to a cabin near Lake Aldridge, off-grid, no phone, no internet. He's been living under a different name, but I saw him last week at a hardware store just outside town. He's changed his appearance, but it was him. I'm sure of it. The judge turned to the bailiff. Get that location to the authorities. Have someone verify this immediately. And just like that, the case shifted. What had begun as a strange, emotional testimony from a man and his dog had suddenly turned into something far larger, a manhunt, a cover-up unraveling in real time. But James wasn't finished. He stepped back toward the stand, the weight of everything finally catching up to him. His voice was quieter now, but no less steady. When I started at Pine Hill, I thought I'd found my place. I didn't have much, just a few old tools and this coat. But those animals, they were my family. I knew each one by name. I still dream about the ones I lost. I still hear them in the water. He looked down at Harper, whose tail wagged once, softly, as if offering silent support. I used to think I failed them, that I should have broken the door down faster, that I should have stayed, even when they tried to fire me. But if I hadn't kept that note, if I hadn't trusted this dog, I wouldn't be standing here now. He turned to the jury, his eyes pleading, not for sympathy, but for understanding. These kittens, they weren't just left behind. They were left to die. And if Carson had gotten away with it, he'd do it again, somewhere else. Different name, same cruelty. That's why I carried them here. Not for pity, but to show you they matter, that all of them did. The judge finally spoke again, his voice quieter than before. Mr. Dalton, your testimony has taken this court into uncharted territory, but I believe I speak for everyone when I say we are listening. Outside the courthouse, the news vans had already arrived. Word was spreading fast, not just about the dog or the kittens, but about the man who risked everything to bring them into the light. And somewhere, in a cabin by a frozen lake, a man who thought he was safe, just felt the world shift beneath him, because the truth wasn't buried anymore. It had fur, and paws, and 5 tiny meows that refused to be forgotten. The drive to Lake Aldridge was quiet at first. Too quiet. James sat in the back of the unmarked vehicle. Harper curled up at his feet, resting his chin on James's boot. One of the officers riding shotgun occasionally glanced back through the mirror, but no one said much. The air between them was dense, like they all knew this wasn't going to end cleanly. Evelyn had given them directions with shaky fingers, her voice faltering as she recalled the twisted road and the crooked mailbox that marked the turnoff to Carson's hidden cabin. James could barely keep his hands from shaking. He kept one, resting on Harper's head, grounding himself in the one soul who never lied, never left, never failed. The officer behind the wheel finally spoke as they turned off the main road. "If this goes sideways, you stay in the car. Understood?" James didn't respond at first. Then softly, "If he has animals in there, I'm going in." The cabin appeared through the trees like a shadow, low-roofed, half buried in snow, with smoke curling from the chimney. It looked peaceful from a distance, too peaceful. As they approached, James spotted the chain-link enclosure behind the bay shed. Empty bowls, a single rope leash hung from a nail. The closer they got, the more his stomach twisted. The officers exited first, weapons holstered but hands ready. One knocked on the door. Another circled toward the back. No answer. No sound. Then, Harper stood, ears up, nose twitching. He let out a low, trembling growl. James stepped out. "Get back in the car," the officer barked. But Harper took off before anyone could stop him, bolting toward the cabin, then veering sharply to the left, toward a root cellar half hidden, behind the firewood stack. The moment Harper reached it, he began barking wildly. James ran. He didn't wait for permission. He didn't need it. He reached the cellar door just as the officers caught up. One of them wrenched the door open while the other shone a flashlight inside. The stench hit them first. Urine, mold, something else, something raw and wrong. And then they heard it. A whimper, faint, trembling. The beam of the flashlight caught on eyes. A cage. Inside, barely moving, was a small beagle with bones poking through her skin and a pink ribbon crusted with dirt still tied around her neck. Next to her, curled in a shivering ball, were 3 newborn puppies, barely alive. "Oh my God," one of the officers whispered. James dropped to his knees. "It's another litter. He's doing it again." He never stopped. As the officers rushed to unlock the door and radio backup, James reached inside the cage, tears pouring freely now. The mother dog looked up at him with the faintest flicker of trust. He cradled one of the puppies in his palm, cold, breathing, but only just. Then Harper barked again, this time from inside the cabin. The door had swung open during the chaos, and he had gone inside. James called out, voice hoarse, heart racing. "Harper!" No answer. He ran in. The cabin was dark, lit only by the dying glow of a fireplace and the rhythmic ticking of an old clock on the mantel. Files were strewn across the table. A wall of surveillance monitors blinked faintly from the corner. Cages lined the far wall, empty, but the stains and chew marks told enough of the story. A cot was unmade in the back, and on it sat Carson, older, gaunter, but unmistakably him. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't stand. He just sat there, staring at the fire like it held all the answers he'd run out of. "I figured it was you," he muttered. "That coat, that damn dog." James didn't respond. He just stepped between the doorway and Harper, who stood growling low near the center of the room. "You had your chance to walk away," Carson continued. "You had your job, your paychecks, but no, you had to play hero." James's hands were shaking, not from fear, but fury. Those animals weren't garbage. They weren't a way to squeeze donations. They were living. They trusted us. Carson let out a bitter laugh. "You think people care? You think the public really wants the truth? They want stories, sad ones with happy endings. They donate to make themselves feel good. But they don't want to know what happens when there's no money left. No room, no solutions. They want people who care enough to try anyway," James snapped. "People like Marlene." That got Carson's attention. His eyes darkened. "She should have stayed out of it. She died trying to stop you." Carson stood slowly, for the first time, his body frail, but his voice still cold. "You can't prove anything." James held up his phone. "Harper's collar cam says otherwise." Carson froze. "You always underestimated the animals. You didn't think one dog could break your story wide open." James took a step closer. But Harper saved more than lives. He saved proof. And today we're going to bury you in it. Outside, sirens wailed. Red and blue lights danced across the snow. The officers stormed in just as Carson lunged forward, but it was already too late. Harper barked and leapt between them. Carson stumbled, backward, slipping on the rug, crashing into the table. The officers pinned him within seconds. James stood still, breathing hard, watching the man who had haunted every corner of his memory finally dragged out into the cold. And for the first time in months, maybe years, the silence that followed didn't feel heavy. It felt like justice. Like something broken finally beginning to heal. Harper walked to James, nudging his hand softly, tail low but wagging. And when James looked down, he whispered, "You did it, buddy. You brought us all the way." But the story wasn't finished. Yet not until every survivor was safe, and every voice, every small forgotten life was heard.